Hey, how's it going guys? My name is Aylwood and today we're taking a look at Tormented Souls, a brand new game just released on practically all platforms including 9th gen consoles, and to answer the ultimate question, as always, is it worth your time? So, Tormented Souls is a single-player action survival horror game. Set in a disturbingly gruesome hospital, you take on the role of a woman named Caroline, set out to investigate the whereabouts of two little girls. You'll be exploring the halls of this hellish institution, using a variety of makeshift weaponry, all while avoiding the many hostile monstrosities roaming the corridors. So aesthetically, it's safe to say that hyper-realistic objects, incredibly accurate gloss effects, and an abundance of darkness can really produce an incredibly sinister, ominous atmosphere. Tormented Souls being an ideal example. Combine these with semi-fixed camera angles and a healthy dose of interesting puzzles, and you've got a familiar, old-school inspired experience that really brings home that survival horror feel. Colours used are considerably dark yet quite vivid throughout. This provides that serious, realistic feel to the game's environments, especially in areas with minimal lighting. Lighting effects are incredibly realistic no matter where you are in the game. Impressive shadow effects, eerie ambient / dust effects, and the powerful torch and candlelights all provide a varying level of comfort or distress depending on your location and surroundings. The subtle flicker and shadow distant blurs being especially creative. Textures and detail though, I have to say, are by far my favourite visual assets of the game. Incredibly detailed, full of character, and interact flawlessly with the many different lighting effects throughout. Stone objects appear aged, wood objects appear blemished, and the many different damp, bloodied, and metallic surfaces are very accurate when compared to real-life reference, all thanks to the incredibly precise surface and gloss effects. Very impressive, I must say. The UI is very nice, practically non-existent, just the way we'd like it. Other screens like the various dialogue boxes and item examination screens are great. The inventory screen, however, did seem a bit out of place with its illuminating X-ray theme, but nothing to lose sleep over. Level layouts are very nice considering the size of the hospital and its underground. Easily distinguishable paths, pleasantly positioned rooms, and surprisingly minimal ground clutter keep your travel routes memorable and somewhat enjoyable. Character and enemy designs though are unfortunately this game's weakest link visually speaking. Not so much from a texture or physics perspective, but definitely from a facial design and body animation standpoint. Face shapes and movements are noticeably static, overly simple, and lack any realistic emotion during both cutscenes and combat. Character model animations are not the best either. Caroline's basic movement animations are a touch too stiff during general gameplay and cutscenes, but the enemy attacks are noticeably overdramatic, come with too much build-up and cooldown between each hit, resulting in somewhat laughable encounters most of the time. If it wasn't for the bile-spitting, legless, bald monsters and their practically undodgeable spit attacks, I would have used far less healing items throughout my entire run. Overall, a pretty impressive, chilling visual standard that easily captures that classic survival horror vibe. The OSTs of Tormented Souls, I have to say, are incredibly good. Very clear, high quality, dark SFX sounds used to create some truly frightening, ominous music that really sets a horrifying atmosphere. Each track is surprisingly unique considering the consistent tempo, high notes used, and lingering reverbs throughout. A lot of the OSTs are stuck on a short, loop-like tune with varying in-your-face and drawn-out sounds. Due to their nature, you may think these soundtracks would become repetitive over time, but take my word for it, it only adds to the tension. If you're actually brave enough to play alone using headphones on high volume, trust me, you will be looking over your shoulder throughout the night. It's not all doom and gloom, however. There are plenty of comforting, light-hearted piano-themed tracks, as well as operatic vocals to break up the consistent dread felt throughout the hospital. Make the most of them though, as they don't appear often. Everything else sound-related, like ambient sounds, footsteps, and distant enemy sounds, are all very high quality and add an extra layer of immersion immersion to your already chilling experience. The voice acting, however, I found to be a tad too cheesy considering the extremely serious atmosphere of the game. But if anything, it brings me back to my Resident Evil 1 days. Clearly an incredible soundtrack quality that took me by complete surprise from the get-go. Now for the gameplay. So firstly, Tormented Souls doesn't have any difficulty options to choose from before you play. It is what it is whether you like it or not, just like every good game should be. The lore of the game is surprisingly gripping throughout, yet seems to raise more questions the further you progress. But as mentioned, you take on the role of a woman named Caroline. You receive a letter in the post containing a photo of two little girls. This seems to spark some serious curiosity within her because she ends up travelling to an abandoned hospital in the middle of nowhere, completely alone and unarmed. Crazy girl. As you explore the building, you somewhat manage to piece together what's going on here, what happened to the two girls in the photo, and why there are fucked up abomination experiments roaming the halls with you. When you first start the game, you're shown a quick clip of Caroline at home, where you open and examine the letter you received. You're then brought to a short intro cutscene where you see her entering the hospital grounds. You enter the building, get knocked out by an aggressive walking stick, wake up naked in a bath, notice your right eyeball has gone for a midnight stroll, take control of your character and play. As Tormented Souls supports both dynamic and classic tank controls, you shouldn't have a big problem getting used to either. Keep in mind though that the dynamic controls provide a far greater combat advantage in all cases, and if you're unfamiliar with semi-fixed camera angles in general, it may take you a moment to adjust to them. Other controls include aiming to ready your weapon, firing to deal damage, backstepping to dodge incoming attacks, and reloading your weapon. Everything you could possibly need. Try to prioritize running instead of back steps because the recovery frames are not the greatest and often lead to enemies getting free attacks on you. The base concept of the game is practically identical to other survival horror games out there. You explore the map, open paths, solve puzzles, place key items in their correct locations, and deal with the many hostile threats, all while managing limited ammo, healing items, and recording tapes to save the game with. Keep in mind that deaths revert you back to your previous save, low HP causes you to run slower, and your map is actually accessed via your file screen from your inventory, so don't expect a built-in compass. What makes this game unique, however, is its engulfing darkness mechanics, its surprisingly fun and unique puzzles, and the way it blends concepts from science fiction, possibly magic, and time travel together. If you're ever too far away from an equipped or environmental light source, you'll notice the screen start to pixelate and a scary soundtrack become more intense. This renders you unable to fire weapons, interact with objects, and will eventually insta-kill you. When it comes to the puzzles, I'm not gonna lie, I looked way too much into most of them when coming up with my own resolution. For the most part, they're brilliantly simple and are usually specific to the room you're in or the item in question. Other times, on rare occasion, they're completely misleading and at a glance make no sense. These include the triple icon door puzzle and that damned fuse box. If the actual size of an object is important, please list it in the item's description. And what the fuck has Tetris got to do with the resolution of this puzzle? I'll tell you for free, absolutely nothing. Don't even look into it. But I suppose I'm partly to blame for not reading the various information logs scattered around the place, so I can't be too harsh. There are also many occasions throughout the game where the borders of fantasy and reality do come into question. These are in the form of dimensional travel mirrors, time traveling video projector screens, and enemies disregarding the laws of physics. These concepts are quite creative to say the least, and did provide some very entertaining and interesting puzzles, but due to their lack of scientific restraint, do cause the lore to stray from the path, become quite far-fetched at times, and create far more questions compared to answers. Combat in Tormented Souls as a whole is far too easy in my opinion. Enemies get pushed around by heavier weapons, take quite a while to get back to their feet, and simply don't chase you fast enough. Due to the aforementioned unit animations and long recovery frames, practically all enemies provide very little threat other than the bile spitter baldies. Most attacks can be avoided by simply baiting an animation, then retreating backwards a step to fire your weapon. This is pretty much a universal trick that works on practically everything, even the floating lady that chases you on occasion. The fact there's only one actual boss fight throughout the entire game doesn't help the situation either. Slightly more enemies, higher poise, and maybe less enemy HP would have provided a more consistent, challenging experience. A couple more boss fights wouldn't have gone amiss either. So for the ultimate question, is it worth your time? Its impressively ominous visuals, brilliantly menacing soundtracks, and puzzle-heavy gameplay provide an undeniably nostalgic, immersive gaming experience that definitely grows on you the further you progress. I'm going to give this game a 4-star or 79 out of 100. I love the incredibly realistic textures and lighting effects throughout. I like the inconvenient map examine system that forces you to learn the layouts of the hospital without a compass. I didn't mind the storyline as a whole, but as you slowly discover what happened to the two girls and why, it does start to make far more sense. Although frustrating on occasion, the puzzles as a whole were very entertaining and surprisingly fun to figure out. Namely the grandfather clock and getting your hands on the scalpel. Very creative. I didn't particularly enjoy the time travel fantasy mechanics though. The dummy dimension concept was very good, but interdimensional time travel was way too far-fetched for me. The conversations between yourself and other NPCs were very unrealistic and often cheesy most of the time, especially when no one is asking basic, realistic questions. The fact that a few objects open on their own off-screen with no indication, like the safe and the green button box, were a waste of valuable time if you didn't happen to notice them. The facial and attack animations, especially for the woman that chases you, were noticeably under par from the start. Resident Evil 4 has better animations than this, and this was back in 2005. Maybe an additional difficulty option with harder or more enemies available would be a good idea. The amount of rooms available to explore from the very start was somewhat daunting. The lack of additional boss fights was a shame considering the game's decent pacing, but I gotta say what really makes me laugh every single time I think about it is this particular scene with the priest. I'll read it out for you. "What is this doing in my soup? Get rid of this thing, would you? It's a 6-inch industrial fucking bolt. How the fuck didn't he notice that in his tiny bowl of soup? What a fucking header." But in all seriousness, I really mean it when I say the game really does grow on you. The first 30 minutes I didn't think I'd enjoy it, but 12 hours game time and 2 whole runs later, I had a lot of fun. The satisfaction from backtracking to solve previously discovered puzzles was brilliant. The combat was noticeably easy but entertaining nonetheless, and progression is quite seamless when you actually remember where certain things are. Tormented Souls has plenty of room for improvement, both visually and mechanically, but successfully scratches that survival horror itch, no problem at all. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more games I'll be reviewing in future, and remember, always check your soup bowls for huge fuck off bolts at the bottom. You never truly know what tin manufacturers get up to these days. But as always, all the best guys, take care.